let's transition into one that I think we're both gonna be in a similar space with this one, because the discussion after Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year has been widely disrespectful to the season that he had, and it goes to show that when I was talking before about writers who are close to the game, know the game as close as you can get. The difference between them and the fans, it showed. And it showed, to me, it showed that I think a lot of NFL fans are too involved with the non-advanced statistics. Because advanced analytics showed that it was between Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett, rightfully so. I honestly, if Micah Parsons got it this year, I would have been upset, but I would have understood, right? But there's been just a lot, lot this year after Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year, which, by the way, before we get into that negative side of it, Myles Garrett wins Defensive Player of the Year. What a huge achievement for this guy. Hitting every single expectation that we expected of him when we took him first overall over hometown boy Mitch Trubisky. He's hit every expectation and some. So, Myles Garrett, congratulations. Now we got to pivot because Derek, I'm gonna let you go because I know I think you're probably gonna have a lot more of a emotional take than I will. So I'll let you kind of run with this.
Well, okay. Myles Garrett wins Defensive Player of the Year, and this has been one of the most insane things that I have seen play out in. Obviously, social media is social media. It's gonna be crazy. But listen, the disrespect is out of this world, and I'm just telling you right now, if you're clicking on this video, this is gonna be I'm gonna say some things, and I'm not gonna apologize, right? I feel very passionate about this because here's the thing, right? Myles Garrett wins NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Tristan, for me, Defensive Player of the Year means who was the most impactful player on defense. To me, that's Myles Garrett. AP Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett. NFLPA, which is the players, Myles Garrett. PFWA, Myles Garrett. PFF, Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, Defensive Player of the Year. So when it comes to this conversation of who should have got it, it's bold that there is this much disagreement and this much argument over this whole situation. And I'm going to do my best to try to explain to you my opinion, because I understand there's going to be a lot of Steelers fans who watch this video. I'm sure there's going to be some Cowboy fans who watch this video of us talking about this. Listen, here's my thing. Did Myles Garrett deserve to win Defensive Player of the Year? Absolutely, right? And this whole conversation, right? Oh, the stats. Look at the stats. Cool. Okay, Myles Garrett, 93.9 grade, 14 sacks, 86 pressures, 4 forced fumbles, 12 tackles for loss, right? Really good numbers. But when you put them side by side next to Micah Parsons and next to TJ Watt, Myles doesn't have the best numbers. So why did Myles Garrett win Defensive Player of the Year? Why? Because Myles Garrett single-handedly led a defense that was top of the line, top 3 defense in the NFL. He was the leader, as he should be, right? And Myles Garrett has been close every year. Myles Garrett has had some really good seasons. He has had some where we've okay, we need to see more. But here's the thing, right? And let's just rip the Band-Aid off. TJ Watt tweets out before the NFL honors, nothing I'm not used to. First of all, TJ Watt, you are an absolute, and I mean that the most disrespectful way possible. First of all, you didn't even show up to the awards. which I don't necessarily have a problem with. Like, if you don't want to go, that's fine. You're not going to win. I'm not saying you have to show up and pretend to be happy if you're not happy. But at the very least, if somebody beats you, you should have enough respect to congratulate them in whatever it is. I don't care, right? And if you want to say politics, right? If somebody beats you in a vote, you should congratulate them. If somebody beats you after a game, sportsmanship, congratulate them. Doesn't mean you got to be happy. Go ahead.
Like Micah Parsons did.
Exactly. And I'm getting to it. TJ Watt made himself look absolutely horrible yesterday. And it doesn't help that the horrible fan base that is the Pittsburgh Steelers fan base is putting just absolute gasoline on the fire, right? And let me tell you something. Let's pivot here real fast because I want to talk about this. The Pittsburgh Steelers organization has been treated as if they are the best thing to ever exist to football, and I'm sick and tired of it. They have gotten every call. They act as if they're entitled to everything. Every year, TJ Watt's Defensive Player of the Year, every year. And if he doesn't get it, it's the end of the world. Same thing, right? They don't like Tomlin as much now, but it's the same thing with Tomlin. Oh, he's the greatest coach of all time. How about this? How about I can sit here as a fan of the Cleveland Browns and say TJ Watt is a great football player. He wasn't the best football player on defense this year. End of story. He wasn't. Why do I say that? The reason why I say that, and you mentioned Micah Parsons. Let's just read it. Micah Parsons responding to somebody, one of these dumbass Steelers fans. Oh, look at the numbers. Micah Parsons responds, horrible take. Myles was the better player. Reality of the situation. Myles faced way more double teams and effect on quarterbacks. Fans got to stop looking at stats and watch the film. Okay, let's talk about that. Great explanation from Micah Parsons, because the average fan would probably agree that TJ Watt should have won Defensive Player of the Year. Why? Because he has the better stats. Okay, awesome. I don't know if it's because fans of other teams obviously don't watch all the games. I completely understand that. But let me explain something to you. The Browns' defense last year was horrible. It was atrocious. We can admit that. Everybody can admit that. The Browns sucked last year defensively. And yes, some guys were brought in this year. Zadarius Smith was a huge part. Dalvin Tomlinson was a huge part. You know why Myles Garrett didn't win Defensive Player of the Year the last couple years? It's because he had to do it all himself. Myles Garrett has been asked to do everything himself defensively for the Browns for many, many years. Since he was brought into this team, we have failed to surround him with talent, especially on the defensive line. This past season, we had the coverage in the secondary, and we had enough on the defensive line that it wasn't just him. And listen, I've been to many games. I watch every game. The man is held every single play. He is held every single play. He is so good that is what you have to do. And he's not the only one. Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, all these guys get held frequently. The difference is, what does Myles Garrett do? What does TJ Watt do? They don't play the same position. And I'm sick and tired of sitting here and pretending like they do. They don't. They do similar things, but they don't play the same position. Right? And anybody who knows and can look at it objectively, can realize that. TJ Watt plays outside linebacker as an edge rusher in a 3-4-ish defense. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers do. The Browns play a 4-3. Sometimes 4-2. Joe Woods ran a 4-2. That's not the point. Anyway, so what is TJ Watt doing? TJ Watt got moved to the right side, or to the left side rather, in 2018. They moved him to the weak side, going against right tackles, where he rarely faces the best opposition as far as on the offensive line, and he's rarely getting the same amount of double teams. Why? Okay, let's break this down. NFL quarterbacks, you want to protect their blind side. That is what you want to do, right? Because obviously, if you see the pressure coming, you can move around in the pocket, get out of the way, whatever. So the Steelers, and I'm not saying they're wrong by doing this. I think it's genius. Move TJ to the weak side. right? That's where he plays. Now, he also drops back into coverage. He does stuff as kind of a linebacker edge hybrid at times. He does a lot of different things. TJ Watt and Myles Garrett don't play the same, right? It would be one thing if we were talking about Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett, right? They do the same thing. They play the same position. We can talk about that. Myles Garrett is not standing up on the edge, facing the worst tackle they have every time, right? And again, obviously, it's team to team, so you have to break that down. But the thing is here, context matters. And I am so sick and tired of people taking stuff out of context, acting like certain things aren't important, and we just have to look at the numbers. And, oh, he got snubbed. Listen, who won MVP this year? Lamar Jackson. There were 10 quarterbacks with better stats and better numbers than Lamar Jackson. Are you hearing people say that Brock Purdy should have won MVP? No, not a lot. There are a couple. I have seen a couple people be like, oh, Lamar shouldn't have won. Why did Lamar Jackson win MVP? It is because he was the most impactful player this season on any team, any position. He was the most impactful player. Okay. Did he have the better stats? No. It's the same thing here. But because Myles Garrett plays for the Cleveland Browns and plays in the city of Cleveland, we want to act like he didn't do. And it pisses me off because, listen, I'll hear your arguments. I will hear the arguments of he didn't do anything in the playoff game. That's fine. I completely agree. I'll hear the argument that towards the end of the year, his production kind of dipped off a little bit. I'll hear that. That's fine. But the reality is this is a regular season award. That's what this is. The same reason why Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year. It wasn't what he did in the playoffs. It was because you had the situation that you had and you did what you did with it. Myles Garrett this past season was the most dominant defensive player in football. And in my opinion, I don't think it's close. I saw it with my own two eyes. Myles Garrett, critical times. He single-handedly won the Colts game. Single-handedly. The team came out and did not play well that game. You know who did? Myles Garrett. And Myles won that game. So, listen, it's insane to me how you can have somebody who is so unbelievably disrespected for no reason other than the fact that he plays in Cleveland, Ohio. That is the only thing that makes sense to me at all. Because let's talk about it, right? Oh, the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're so great. You're the best thing to ever happen to football. Well, 21st defensively in yards allowed this past year. 21st defensively in yards per carry allowed. 21st defensively in third down conversion. Let me tell you something. If you have the defensive player of the year, your defense as a whole should be better. And I'll hear, okay, well, oh, he didn't have that much around him. Let me tell you something. TJ Watt, since he's been in the NFL, has had a lot more help on that defensive line than Myles Garrett has. Cameron Hayward, as much as I don't like him, he's one of the players that for whatever reason, I can respect how good he is, but I just don't like him because he's a Steeler. That's just what it is. But I can recognize how good he is in the middle. He's a fantastic, dominant player, right? You've had him. You had Bud Dupree, which now you can look at and be like, oh, what's Bud Dupree? But guess what? In Pittsburgh, in that scheme, Bud Dupree was great. And now you have Alex Highsmith, who is great in your scheme. So to sit here and say that TJ Watt got snubbed and this is ridiculous and, oh, the NFL scriptwriters rigged this shit. No. Here's the reality. You can't admit that somebody was better than your hero. That's what it is. At the end of the day, that's what this is. Because if anybody has the argument to be made, it's Dallas Cowboys fans. Micah Parsons is being disrespected here more than TJ Watt. I mean, I don't see Cowboys fans bitching that much. And everybody wants to talk about how bad of a fan base the Cowboys have. I'm here to tell you the Pittsburgh Steelers have the worst fan base in the NFL and in sports. And I have no problem saying that. Because listen, I know a lot of Steelers fans. I have great close relationships with a lot of Steelers fans. Family, friends, whatever. Love them to death. Not all of them are bad. But, obviously the Browns, we have our own issues with our fan base. But the fact that these fans have the nerve to sit here and act like this is so fucking criminal, that you don't have to give respect to Myles Garrett at all is insane to me. And you know what pisses me off the most? I know I've been going on a rant and I could go for the next 4 hours. But what pisses me off the most is I'm seeing fans on Twitter talking about TJ Watt didn't win Defensive Player of the Year because of his skin color. That is horseshit. That is so unbelievably low and embarrassing as a fan base that is the excuse that you're going to bring up is because TJ Watt is white. Like, what the is wrong with you? Respectfully. Why are we having this conversation? Again, and collusion, whatever. AP Defensive Player of the Year, NFLPA, voted by the players, Defensive Player of the Year, PFWA Defensive Player of the Year, PFF Defensive Player of the Year. If it was such a screw job, why is everybody making Myles Garrett Defensive Player of the Year? Like, can somebody explain that to me? Because I don't understand. The last thing I'll say, because I gotta shut up or I could keep going. Please, for the love of God, this argument between TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, can we look at it objectively? Can we look at the positions that they play? Can we recognize the fact that Myles Garrett is played all over the defensive line and he is seeing double and triple teams? And I'm not saying TJ Watt never does. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But here's another thing, Steelers fans, and I'll throw this up on the post edit because this is my you to you. I have never once seen Myles Garrett get put on his ass like I saw DeJuan Jones put TJ Watt on his ass. So you know what? You can sit here and say Cleveland is Cleveland. F you. Yes, we are. We're here. We're not going away. You can kiss my ass and suck my dick because I am not putting up with this bullshit of acting like we don't deserve what we got. Because yes, we do. We deserved Coach of the Year, even though it was close. We deserved Defensive Player of the Year, even though there's an argument to be made. But guess what? You know who shouldn't be in that argument? You know who should be third? Your guy. So fuck you. That's all I have to say.
Whew. All right. Well, I'll quickly wrap this up because I feel like you expressed a lot of the conversation that I kind of had, except I know emotionally you feel this one a lot. And I mean, I do too. It's just not how I typically approach stuff myself. Here's what I'll say. So Max Crosby, I feel like did deserve some recognition too.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Yes. No, you're fine. But at the same token, we've got to apply the same rules to Max Crosby as has been applied to Myles Garrett in the past. His team was not good. So that kind of ruled him out. I'm in total agreement with you that the only fan base, in my opinion, that can argue for Defensive Player of the Year for their guy is the Cowboys for Parsons. Because he gets similar, he pretty much gets the same treatment as Myles, right? And here's what I'll say about TJ, okay? Is double team rate and pass rush win rate. Those stats matter for pass rushers. And TJ Watt happens to be a pass rusher. If TJ Watt is so dominant and is so great, and all of these people that are saying, well, I get that Myles gets doubled and tripled, but TJ gets doubled too. Why does Alex Highsmith have a higher double team rate? I'm just going to let that brew for a sec. Why is it that Alex Highsmith is doubled more than TJ Watt? That isn't me saying necessarily that Alex Highsmith is a better edge rusher than TJ Watt. I don't think that's the case. But Alex Highsmith is doubled more than TJ Watt. The statistics have come out on that, and that is true. At the end of the day, I think what it is I think it's that Steelers scheme. The position he plays makes it that way. It's not like with TJ, you can just have a tackle and slide over a guard, because he's in a position where he can drop back in coverage. And so when we talk about it from a purely pass rush standpoint, Myles Garrett was way better than TJ Watt this year. Because, again, TJ doesn't go against the harder competition that Myles goes against, and Myles has to fight tougher opponents and more opponents to get to the quarterback. Teams have to game plan for Myles Garrett, and it completely takes away what that team likes to do, their identity. You've seen the Cincinnati Bengals try it on us for years, where they try to be able to play their own brand of football, and every time it happens, Myles Garrett ruins the game for them. Every single year. Look back at week 1. Myles Garrett was a menace. He was an absolute menace. You mentioned it. The Colts game. He won that game for us. If you watch it over again, he quite literally dragged this team to victory. I think himself, I want to say it was like 19 points that he swung in our favor, because he got the fumble recovery in the end zone, right? Because he got Gardner to fumble, so that's 7 points. And he blocked the field goal. Mm-hmm. He also had 2 sacks that took the Colts out of field goal range. That's the type of swing that we're talking about here for this guy, right? In that game in particular. And then the Titans game, he had that viral clip of him switching sides of the line. The Titans were manning 2 tight ends on Myles Garrett, which is the reason why that clip went viral. And that goes to show the impact that this guy has. The fact that they've got to assign 3 people to blocking him is insane. Even though we have Zadarius Smith on the other side of the line. You want to talk about help, right? Mm-hmm. We had Zadarius Smith on the other side of the line. We had Dalvin Tomlinson in the middle. And we still had seen Myles Garrett getting that much attention. I think that the argument for TJ, I think it's a lot of casual fans that look at counting stats and don't look at advanced analytics.
Piss them off with that.
And I don't give a shit.
I know.
Like, put on the film, like, watch, like, what Micah Parsons said. Watch what Myles Garrett has to do to generate pressure, which, by the way, he generates pressure all the time. All the time. It never gets put on his ass by one guy. Dwan Jones. It does not happen, right? The only guy who you can argue one-on-one got the better of Myles Garrett this year is Laramie Tunsil, and he's a hell of a left tackle, and I think we can agree there. An incredible left tackle, all-pro player. He probably should have gotten an all-pro nod. So I don't think that we have any arguments there, but Trent Williams against the Niners, he kind of injured Trent Williams, not like intentionally tried to hurt him, but he threw Trent Williams, one of the best left tackles the NFL's ever seen. He's done that. I think that if you watch the film, you look at the advanced analytics, not just the counting stats, the argument was clearly down to Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons. And by the way, a lot of respect for Micah Parsons after this.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, he did say Cleveland is Cleveland, which, screw you. Go fuck yourself. But I respect his respect towards Myles Garrett's performance this year. That I will say. And it's clear. Clear as day. I think Micah Parsons is probably next year's Defensive Player of the Year if we're putting early bets on it. Because he's a hell of a player. He has to put up with similar stuff that Myles Garrett has to. And ultimately, like I said, it was between those two. And any other discussions for other people are either highly biased, or it's casual fans that just look at stats, the stats that the NFL puts in front of you. Yeah, that's really all I've got left. We've got a long conversation about draft quarterbacks to get into. We were talking before the podcast about this is probably going to be a 3-hour long podcast, but before we transition to draft quarterbacks, it's a completely different mood, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Any final little tidbits? Any final little thoughts on this Myles Garrett discussion before we put it to rest?
Yeah. I'll say this. I understand if you're still watching at this point and you haven't clicked off after my my rant, you probably think I'm a psychopath and everything I said is crazy. But this is all I want, right? At the end of the day, this is all I want. We as Browns fans, myself and Tristan, and I know the majority of the fan base, there certainly are some who will disagree with this, have a hell of a lot of respect for TJ Watt. Think he's an unbelievable elite player and one of the best in the NFL for sure.
I'll go as far as to say, like, Micah Parsons, I would say, is pushing him. He is the best 3-4 edge in the National Football League.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we can you and I can both agree on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's the thing. That's what pisses me off the most. Is not my perspective is not TJ Watt is a terrible player or anything like that. I think what he did was absolute horseshit of how he treated this. And this is what I'm asking for, Steelers fans. All I'm asking is that you treat Myles with some respect. I'm not saying you have to think he's the best player of all time, whatever, or even best in the NFL. That's not what I'm asking. All I'm asking is that you give him some respect. And I know there's certainly a big portion of the fan base that does, who absolutely respect Myles Garrett. But I will say this. The stuff with treating TJ Watt as if he's Lawrence Taylor or like the greatest defensive player of all time to ever exist has got to stop. It's just got to stop, right? We can sit here and admit he's unbelievable. He is great. Would I love to have him on my team? Absolutely. But the reality of the situation is this. Whether if you want to admit this or not, I don't care. Doesn't make a difference to me. I know you don't care about my opinion because I've already done pissed you off. But they play two separate positions. Two separate positions in two different defensive styles. Right? Is TJ Watt more impactful in that defensive style? Absolutely. Is Myles Garrett more impactful in our defensive style? Absolutely. If you flip-flopped him and you put Myles Garrett in a 3-4 as an outside linebacker and TJ Watt in a 4-3, neither one of them are going to be as good as they are currently in the situations that you have them in. That's the difference. That's the perspective that I'm coming from and that I want to get across is like, hey, we have to start giving respect where respect is due. And I think TJ Watt has gotten a ton of respect, well-deserved. I think he has been treated as one of, if not the best defensive player in football for years. And I think he certainly has been the best defensive player in football at times throughout his career. However, Myles Garrett has been and is in that same conversation. But for whatever reason, there are some people that don't want to put him in there. And all I'm asking is that you treat us with the same respect and treat Myles in the same conversation. That's all I ask. That's all I want. And we'll be okay. That's fine.
And the very last thing I'm going to say is, Derek, I know quite a while, we might have not said this on the podcast before. Might have been something we were just talking about in passing, but something that we were talking about is, when are people going to stop counting like wins as a quarterback stat? You know, when are people going to stop, putting everything on a quarterback when a quarterback doesn't win. You know, because there's so many other factors in the game of football, right? When are we going to stop having just counting stats, right? Sacks. When are we going to stop having sacks count as this definitive measurement for how good a defensive player is? Because Aaron Donald, when he won over TJ Watt, it was well deserved because the guy got doubled, tripled every single day, every single game, and you know it was nonstop. And I feel like Aaron Donald got more respect that year than Myles Garrett is getting now, even though the counting stats are very similar. It's about the fact that Myles would be double teamed more, and even though he was double teamed more, he won more in pass rushing. That's what it came to, and he had a lot of pressures this year. Because pressures matter. Pressures matter because it influences a quarterback's decision to get the ball out. It affects the quarterback, not just sacks. Yeah. Sacks are one little sliver of it. So that's the last thing I'll say.
And this argument can be said for everybody, but I'm just gonna finish up with it. Listen, Myles Garrett, the rate at which he was held and calls not being called and face masks, right? Us as Browns fans know that, but if you're a fan of a different NFL team, and it happens to everybody, like I said, but had he been treated similar to someone else, or I should say, if calls were called more fairly than they are, and again, happens to everybody, I'm not saying it doesn't, right? But had he gotten more flags, had he gotten more calls his way, or had he not been held or face masked, this whole stats conversation on who has the better stats, Myles would have even much better stats. You know, so I think that is certainly a part of the conversation. So, again, I know I said a lot of crazy things. Half of it is just talking shit. But, you know, for real, I think there's an unbelievable amount of disrespect for no reason. So, I'll leave it at that.